The stars had seen many terrors in their endless existence. They had watched empires rise and fall. They had witnessed the birth of gods and the death of worlds. But in all their ancient memory, they had never seen anything quite like him. Kang Do-hyun stood at the viewing window of his warship, the Eclipse. His reflection stared back at him, a face carved from stone, eyes as dark as the void outside. He was 34 years old, but he looked older. War did that to a man. War and loneliness, and the weight of a reputation that followed him like a shadow. Outside, 3 alien fleets hung in the darkness. The Vorn with their massive carrier ships, the Telmari with their sleek destroyers, the Grath with their heavily armored battlecruisers. Together, they had enough firepower to burn 100 worlds. They had been fighting each other for 60 years over a stretch of space that held little value but much pride. And now they waited. Not for battle, not for negotiation. They waited for him. "Commander," said Lieutenant Yuna, stepping onto the bridge. She was a tall woman with sharp features and sharper instincts. She had served under Do-hyun for 10 years, and in all that time, she had never seen him show fear. She had also never seen him smile. "The ambassadors are ready." Do-hyun did not turn from the window. "How many guards did they bring?" "The Vorn brought 50, the Telmari brought 30, the Grath brought 100. And us." "Just you, sir, as you requested." A small sound escaped her lips. It might have been a laugh if Yuna ever laughed. The Grath ambassador nearly fainted when we told him. He thought it was a trap. "It is not a trap," Do-hyun said quietly. "It is a statement." He finally turned and walked toward the door. His boots made no sound on the metal floor. He moved like smoke, like darkness given form. The crew members in his path stepped aside without thinking, their bodies responding to some ancient instinct that screamed danger. This was the effect he had, not just on aliens, but on his own people. They respected him, they followed him, but they also feared him, just a little, in the quiet places of their hearts. The meeting chamber was a large circular room in the center of the station. It was neutral ground, chosen specifically because it belonged to no one. The 3 alien delegations had already arrived. They sat at their separate tables, surrounded by their guards, their translators, their advisors. And then the door opened, and Kang Do-hyun walked in alone. The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that falls when a predator enters a space full of prey. The Grath guards tightened their grips on their weapons. The Telmari ambassador's blue skin turned pale. The Vorn delegation leader, a massive creature with 4 arms and scales like armor, actually took a step backward. Do-hyun walked to the center of the room and stopped. "You have been fighting for 60 years, he said. His voice was calm, almost soft. He did not need to shout. "Your war has killed billions. It has destroyed colonies. It has orphaned children and widowed partners across 100 worlds." No one spoke. No one dared. "I am here to tell you that your war ends today." The Vorn leader found his courage. He stepped forward, his 4 hands clenched into fists. "And who are you to command us, human? You are one man, one small, fragile creature from a small, fragile world. Your species only discovered space travel 200 years ago. We were building empires when your ancestors were living in caves." Do-hyun looked at him. Just looked, and the Vorn leader stopped moving, stopped speaking, stopped breathing for a moment. There was something in those dark human eyes. Something that spoke of violence beyond imagination. Something that whispered of worlds burned and fleets destroyed and enemies who had made the mistake of underestimating the small, fragile creatures from Earth. "You know who I am," Do-hyun said. And he did. They all did. Every species in 12 star systems knew the name. The Black Phantom, the terror of galaxies. The human who had ended the siege of Proxima alone. The commander who had destroyed the Krethian armada with a single ship. The man who had walked into the fortress of the Dread Emperor and walked out carrying the Emperor's head. The Vorn leader sat down. "Your war ends today," Do-hyun repeated. "You will sign a peace treaty. You will return to your territories. You will release all prisoners and pay reparations to the civilian populations you have harmed. These are not requests. And if we refuse, The Telmari ambassador's voice was barely a whisper. Do-yun turned to look at him. You will not refuse. The silence stretched. Outside, the stars continued their eternal watch. And one by one, the alien delegations reached for their ceremonial pens. Later, after the treaties were signed and the fleets had begun their slow retreat, Yuna found Do-hyun back at the viewing window. He had not moved. He had not celebrated. He had simply returned to his silent vigil, watching the darkness as if searching for something he could not name. That was well done, Commander, she said carefully. You ended a 60-year war without firing a single shot. I ended nothing, Do-hyun replied. I delayed. Wars do not end. They simply sleep, waiting to wake again. Yuna studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the emptiness in his eyes. She had always wondered what drove him, what kept him fighting, what made him into this weapon that humanity pointed at its enemies. May I ask you something personal, sir? You may ask. Do you ever think about what comes after? After the wars, after the battles? Do you ever think about living? Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, as if coming from somewhere far away. I stopped living when I was 17. What remains is simply continuing. He did not explain. He never explained. But Yuna knew the stories. Everyone knew the stories. Colony Hagen, the massacre. 2,000 civilians slaughtered by raiders while the defense fleet arrived too late. And one boy, just 17, who had hidden in the wreckage and watched his entire world burn. That boy had died with his colony. What rose from the ashes was something else, something harder, something that had decided in those dark hours of blood and fire that he would become the thing that monsters feared, and he had succeeded. The galaxy trembled at his name. Empires negotiated rather than face his wrath. The human species, once dismissed as primitive newcomers, was now spoken of in hushed and terrified tones. But success had its price, and the price was this: a man who stood alone at windows, watching stars he could not touch, feeling nothing at all. Get some rest, Lieutenant, Do-hyun said. We depart in 6 hours. There are reports of a distress signal from the outer territories. Yes, Commander. Yuna left him there, silhouetted against the infinite dark. She wondered, not for the first time, if there was anything left inside him that could still be called human. She did not know that the answer was coming. It was floating in the wreckage of a destroyed research station, waiting to be found. It had gentle eyes and a stubborn heart, and a way of looking at monsters that saw the men they used to be. Her name was Han Soo-jin, and she was about to change everything. The distress signal was 3 days old when the eclipse arrived. That was too long. In space, 3 days could mean the difference between rescue and recovery, between finding survivors and finding graves. Kang Do-hyun stood on the bridge as his ship approached the coordinates. What he saw made even his hardened heart pause. Station Nova 7 had been a research colony. It had housed 300 scientists from 12 different species, humans, Velmari, Kori, and others, all working together to study ways of living in peace. It was a symbol of hope in a galaxy that had little of it. Now it was debris. Twisted metal and shattered glass floated in the darkness like the scattered bones of a great beast. Fires still burned in some sections, fed by leaking oxygen. Bodies drifted among the wreckage, frozen in the eternal cold of space. Raiders, Yuna said grimly, reading the damage patterns. Looks like Crimson Fleet. They hit fast and hard, took what they wanted, killed the rest. Survivors? Scans show one life sign, Commander. Human. Sector 7, near the biological labs. One survivor out of 300. Do-hyun felt nothing. He had seen worse. He had done worse in the name of protecting humanity. But he filed the information away in the cold place where he kept his rage, saving it for when he found the Crimson Fleet. Send a rescue team, he ordered. Sir, the structure is unstable. Sector 7 could collapse at any moment. Then send them quickly. The rescue took 4 hours. 4 hours of cutting through wreckage, navigating collapsing corridors, and fighting the station's failing systems. But finally, the team returned, carrying a single figure wrapped in emergency blankets. Do-hyun was waiting in the medical bay. He told himself it was standard procedure. A commander should oversee important operations. But something had pulled him there. Some instinct he could not name. The survivor was a woman, young, perhaps 28 or 29. She had a gentle face, soft features that seemed wrong in this place of death and metal. Her hair was long and dark, tangled with dust and debris. Her clothes were torn, her skin bruised, but she was alive. She was alive because she had sealed herself in an emergency pod for 3 days with limited oxygen. She had survived on stubbornness and hope while her colleagues died around her. The medical officer looked up as Do-hyun entered. "She is stable, Commander. Dehydrated and malnourished, but no serious injuries." "She was lucky." "Lucky," Do-hyun repeated. The word tasted strange in his mouth. The woman's eyes opened. They were clear and brown, like warm earth after rain. They found Do-hyun's face and studied him with surprising steadiness for someone who had just survived a massacre. "Where am I?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse but calm. "You are aboard the Eclipse. I am Commander Kang Do-hyun. You are safe." Something flickered across her face. Recognition. And then, to his surprise, anger. "Kang Do-hyun," she said slowly. "The Black Phantom. You know me. Everyone knows you." She pushed herself up despite the medical officer's protests. "You are the reason the Crimson Fleet exists." The medical bay went quiet. No one spoke to Do-hyun like this. No one dared. But this woman, this survivor who should have been grateful and broken, looked at him like he was the enemy. "Explain," Do-hyun said. "The Crimson Fleet was formed by survivors of your attacks, families of soldiers you killed, people who lost everything when you destroyed their homes in your wars." Her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "They became raiders because you taught the galaxy that violence is the only answer. And now my friends are dead because of what you created." Do-hyun stood very still. He had been called many things. Monster, demon, terror. He had accepted these names as the price of protecting his people. But he had never been confronted with the consequences quite like this. "I do what is necessary," he said finally. "Necessary." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what we were doing on Nova 7? We were proving that species could live together peacefully. We were showing that cooperation was possible. And you know what destroyed us? The cycle of violence that men like you keep spinning." "You should rest," the medical officer said nervously. "You have been through a trauma." "I have been through a war that never had to happen." She looked at Do-hyun again, and her gaze cut deeper than any weapon. "You are not a hero. You are a monster wearing a hero's mask." Do-hyun turned and left the medical bay. His face showed nothing. His stride did not falter. But something inside him, something he had thought long dead, stirred in response to her words. Over the following days, he found himself thinking about her. Han Soo-jin, that was her name, according to her records. A xenobiologist who had spent her career studying how different species could understand each other. A woman who believed in peace so strongly that she had dedicated her life to proving it was possible. She was everything he was not, and he could not stop thinking about her. He told himself it was security. She was a civilian on a military vessel. He needed to monitor her, so he monitored her recovery through reports. He monitored her movement through the ship's sensors. He monitored the way she spoke with his crew, learning their names, asking about their families, treating them like people instead of soldiers. And then came the incident with the prisoner. The Eclipse had captured a Crimson Fleet raider during the rescue operation. He was wounded, dangerous, and scheduled for execution under military law. The crew hated him. They knew he was part of the group that had destroyed Nova 7, that had killed those 300 innocent researchers. Do-hyun was reviewing the execution orders when alarms sounded from the detention level. He arrived to find Han Soo-jin inside the prisoner's cell, bandaging his wounds while guards stood helplessly outside. "What are you doing?" Do-hyun demanded. "He is hurt." She did not look up from her work. "His wounds are infected. He will die before your execution. He is an enemy. He killed your colleagues." Now she looked up. Those clear brown eyes met his dark ones. "He is a living creature in pain. My colleagues would not want me to become cruel just because cruelty was done to them." "Step out of the cell." "No." The guards shifted nervously. No one refused Kang Do-hyun. No one. I could have you removed by force. You could. She finished her bandaging and stood. But you will not, because somewhere under all that armor, you remember what it means to be human. You remember that mercy is not weakness. She walked past him, out of the cell, down the corridor. She did not bow. She did not apologize. She walked like a woman who knew exactly who she was and refused to be anything else. Do-hyun watched her go, and for the first time in 17 years, he felt something crack in the walls around his heart. Later that night, he found himself outside her quarters. He did not knock. He simply stood there, a man who commanded fleets, who frightened empires, who had become terror itself, standing in a hallway because a woman with gentle eyes had called him a monster. And the worst part was that he could not decide if she was wrong. The door opened. Sujin stood there in simple clothes, her hair still damp from washing. She did not look surprised to see him. "The prisoner will live," she said. "He told me about his family. His daughter is 5 years old. She thinks her father is a merchant. Why are you telling me this?" "Because he is not a monster. He is a man who made terrible choices because he saw no other way." She tilted her head, studying him. "Sound familiar?" Do-hyun had no answer. "Good night, Commander," she said, and closed the door. He stood there for a long time, alone in the corridor, feeling something he had not felt in years. He felt doubt, and somehow that was the most terrifying thing of all. 3 weeks passed. The eclipse moved through deep space, traveling toward the central colonies for resupply. 3 weeks of quiet routine. 3 weeks of Han Sujin living aboard a warship that was never meant for someone like her. And 3 weeks of Kang Do-hyun finding reasons to be wherever she was. He told himself he was monitoring a civilian. He told himself it was his duty as commander. But the lies grew thinner each day, worn away by the simple truth. He could not stay away from her. It started with small things. He would pass by the medical bay when she was helping the doctors. He would visit the mess hall during her mealtimes. He would find business in the lower decks where she had set up a small laboratory to continue her research. Sujin noticed. Of course she noticed. She was a scientist. Observation was her gift. "You are a strange man," she told him one evening, when he appeared at her lab door for the third time that day, with some thin excuse about system inspections. "Strange how?" "The galaxy calls you a monster. Your own crew walks carefully around you like you might explode. But you keep visiting a woman who called you terrible things to your face." She set down her research tablet and studied him. "Why?" Do-hyun did not have an answer. Or rather, he had an answer, but it was buried so deep that he could not reach it. "Your work is interesting," he said instead. "Cross-species communication patterns." Sujin smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed her face, made her look younger, made her look like someone who still believed in good things. "You read my research files. I read everything about everyone on my ship. And what did my files tell you about me? That you have spent 10 years trying to prove that understanding is possible between species. That you believe violence is a failure of communication. That you," he paused, "that you have never given up hope, even when evidence suggests you should." Sujin was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up a chair and gestured for him to sit. He did, feeling strange. He was a commander. He gave orders, attended briefings, made decisions that affected millions. He did not sit in small laboratories with soft-spoken scientists. But here he was. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. He nodded. "When they first brought me aboard and I realized who you were, I was so angry. I had heard all the stories. The Black Phantom, the terror of galaxies, the man who turned the galaxy into a fearful place." She looked at her hands. "I blamed you for everything. For Nova 7, for my friends, for the whole cycle of violence that seems to have no end." That anger was reasonable. "Maybe." She met his eyes again. "But then I started paying attention. I saw you send resources to Colony Ventress when they had a food shortage. Resources from your own ship's supplies. I saw you refuse to fire on an enemy vessel because they were carrying refugees. I saw you spend 3 hours talking to a young crewman because his mother had died and he needed someone to listen." Do-hyun stiffened. Those things were supposed to be private, quiet acts that no one noticed. "You have spies in my crew?" I have eyes, Commander, and a habit of noticing things that do not fit the pattern. She leaned forward slightly. The monster everyone talks about would not do those things. So either the stories are lies, or, she trailed off, or what? Or you are not the monster. You are just a man who decided to become one because he thought it was necessary. The silence stretched between them. Outside the small porthole, stars drifted past like scattered diamonds. The ship hummed its endless mechanical song, and Do-hyun felt something breaking inside him, not violently but slowly, like ice melting in spring. I was 17, he heard himself say. He did not know why he was talking. He never talked about this, but something about her quiet attention made the words spill out. Colony Hedgen, 2,000 people. My parents, my sister, my friends. Everyone I had ever known. Sujin said nothing. She simply listened. Raiders came. The defense fleet was delayed. Some malfunction, some bureaucratic error, something that should not have mattered but did. By the time help arrived, everyone was dead. Everyone except me. How did you survive? I hid. The word tasted like ash. I hid in a storage compartment while my mother screamed for me to run. I hid while they killed my father. I hid while my sister begged for mercy that never came. I was a coward. You were a child. I was old enough to fight, old enough to try. His hands had clenched into fists without his notice. Instead, I hid and listened and survived while everyone I loved died. Sujin reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm against his scarred knuckles. He flinched at the contact. He could not remember the last time someone had touched him gently. That is not cowardice, she said softly. That is trauma. That is a child doing the only thing he could do to survive an impossible situation. I swore that night that I would become strong. So strong that no one would ever hurt the people I cared about again. So strong that the galaxy itself would fear me. He looked at their joined hands, her smooth skin against his battle-worn fingers. I succeeded. The galaxy fears me. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything else. You did not forget. Her voice was certain. You buried it, but it is still there. I have seen it. They sat in silence for a while. The ship continued its journey through the void, and something shifted between them, some wall crumbling, some door opening. Why do you not hate me? Do-hyun asked finally. I have done terrible things. I have killed thousands. I have destroyed entire fleets. The violence I have caused has also saved millions, Sujin interrupted. Do you think I do not know the math? The wars you ended, the invasions you prevented, the colonies you protected, the numbers favor you. The galaxy is not worse because of Kang Do-hyun. It is just more afraid. Fear is a weapon. Fear is also a prison. She squeezed his hand gently. You are not trapped, Commander. You have choices. You could be more than the terror of galaxies if you wanted to be. And what would I be instead? She smiled that small, soft smile again. That is for you to discover. But I think, she hesitated, I think you would be surprised by what is possible. Later that night, Do-hyun could not sleep. He stood at his usual place by the viewing window, watching the stars. But for the first time in years, he was not watching them as a commander. He was watching them as a man who had just felt something warm in a cold universe. Behind him, the door opened. Yuna entered, her face troubled. Commander, I have been receiving reports. The crew is talking. About what? About you and the scientist. They say you have been different lately, softer. Some are worried. Do-hyun turned to face her. And what do you think, Lieutenant? Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something she had never said before. I think that soft is not the same as weak, and I think that if anyone deserves to be more than just a weapon, it is you. She left before he could respond. Do-hyun turned back to the stars, and for the first time in 17 years, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still something left of the boy from Colony Hedgen, something that could learn to live again. The message came at midnight. Ship time. Priority 1. Emergency channel. The kind of message that commanders dreaded because it always meant death. Do-yun was in Soo-jin's laboratory when his communicator screamed its urgent alert. They had been talking for hours as they did most nights now. She had been explaining her research. He had been asking questions, genuinely curious for the first time in years. The walls between them had grown thin, almost transparent. Sometimes their hands would touch. Sometimes she would smile, and he would feel something flutter in his chest like a caged bird testing its wings. But the alert ended all of that. "Commander, to bridge immediately. This is not a drill." He was on his feet before the message finished, all softness vanishing from his face like mist under a burning sun. Soo-jin watched him transform, watched the man she had been speaking with disappear, replaced by the terror of Galaxies. "What is happening?" she asked. "Stay here." His voice was cold again, professional. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone except me." He was gone before she could respond. The bridge was chaos when he arrived. Officers shouted coordinates. Screens displayed tactical data. And on the main view screen, a scene of horror unfolded. One of humanity's outer colonies burning, ships swarming around it like dark insects. "Report," Do-hyun commanded. Yuna turned to him, her face pale. "The Dominion of Krath, sir. They have launched a coordinated attack on human settlements across the frontier. Colony Baram is already gone. Colony Jindo is under siege. We are receiving distress signals from 12 different locations." The Dominion of Krath. Do-hyun knew of them. An alien empire that had watched humanity's rise with growing unease. They had never attacked directly before, preferring to observe, to wait. But something had changed. Why now? Intercepted communications suggest they have decided humans are becoming too powerful. They want to eliminate us before we become unstoppable. Yuna pulled up a tactical display. "Their fleet is massive, Commander. Hundreds of warships. They are hitting civilian targets, population centers. They are not trying to defeat us. They are trying to exterminate us." The numbers on the screen were terrifying. The death toll was already in the millions and climbing. Entire cities had been wiped out in the first wave. Families erased. Children who would never grow up. Parents who would never come home. Do-hyun felt the old rage rising in him. The cold fury that had driven him for 17 years. The monster waking from its brief sleep. "Set course for the Baram system," he ordered. "Maximum speed. And send word to the coalition fleet. The Black Phantom is coming." The next days were a blur of battle preparations. The Eclipse raced toward the conflict zone while Do-hyun planned his campaign. He studied enemy formations. He analyzed their weaknesses. He prepared to become, once again, the thing that made the galaxy tremble. Soo-jin found him in the strategy room on the third day. He was surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet movements and casualty projections. He had not slept. He had barely eaten. The darkness in his eyes had returned, deeper than ever. "Do-hyun," she said softly. It was the first time she had used his name without his title. He did not look up. "You should be preparing for transfer. We will drop you at Station Mira before engaging the enemy. You will be safe there." "I do not want to leave. This is not a request." His voice was flat, emotionless. "What is coming? You should not see it. You should not see what I'm about to become." Soo-jin walked around the displays until she stood directly in front of him. She waited until he was forced to meet her eyes. "What do you think you're about to become?" "A weapon, a terror. The monster you accused me of being when we first met." He laughed bitterly. "You were right, you know. I am exactly what you said. And now that monster is needed again." "No." Her voice was firm. "What is needed is a defender, a protector. Someone who fights because they must, not because they want to. There is a difference. The result is the same. People die." "Yes, people die. But intention matters, Do-hyun. Fighting to protect is not the same as fighting to destroy, even if both involve violence." She reached up and touched his face, a gentle touch that made him flinch. "You can do what needs to be done without losing yourself. I believe that." "Why?" The word cracked with something like desperation. "Why do you believe in me?" "Because I have seen who you are when you are not at war. Because I have watched you struggle with the weight of what you carry. Because I know that the boy from Colony Hagen is still in there, fighting to remember what it means to be human." She did not look away. Because somewhere in these past weeks, I started to care about that boy very much. Do-yun stood frozen. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Around them, the holographic displays showed death and destruction, the galaxy burning. But in this moment, in this small space, there was only her. Sujin, tell me something, she said. When the war is over, if you survive, what will you do? I do not think about after. I have never thought about after. Think about it now. For me, he tried. He tried to imagine a future beyond battle, a life that was not measured in enemies, destroyed and world saved. And slowly, impossibly, an image formed. A quiet place, a garden perhaps, a woman with gentle eyes who looked at him like he was worth saving. But he could not say it, could not put that fragile hope into words. So instead, he said nothing. Sujin nodded slowly, as if she understood, as if his silence told her everything she needed to know, and broke her heart in the process. I will go to Station Mira, she said quietly, as you ordered. She turned to leave, and that is when the words burst out of him, surprising them both. When this is over, I will come back for you. She stopped at the door but did not turn around. Will you? Or will the war find another excuse to keep you? There is always another enemy, Do-hyun, always another threat. The galaxy will never run out of reasons to need the Black Phantom. Sujin, now she turned, and he saw tears on her face, the first tears he had ever seen her shed. Who am I to you? She asked, her voice trembling. Because I need to know. I need to know if I am just another person you will forget when the war calls, if these past weeks meant anything, or if I was just a distraction while the galaxy was quiet. Do-hyun opened his mouth, and nothing came out. He had spent 17 years becoming a weapon. He had learned to kill, to intimidate, to make entire civilizations fear his name. But no one had taught him how to say what he felt. No one had taught him how to admit that this woman, this stubborn, gentle scientist, had become more important to him than anything in the galaxy. The silence stretched between them, and with each passing second, he watched hope die in her eyes. That is what I thought, she whispered. She left. The door closed behind her, and Do-hyun stood alone among his maps of war, feeling something shatter in his chest. Outside, the stars continued to burn. The enemy fleet drew closer, and the terror of galaxies prepared for battle. But for the first time, he was not sure if victory would be worth the cost. The war against the Dominion of Krath lasted 4 months. 4 months of fire and blood and screaming stars. 4 months that changed the galaxy forever. And Kang Do-hyun was at the center of it all. He threw himself into battle with a fury that even his most seasoned officers had never witnessed. Fleet after fleet fell before him. The Dominion commanders, who had dismissed humans as soft and weak, learned the terrible truth. Humans were neither. They were survivors. They were fighters. And when their existence was threatened, they became something terrifying. Do-hyun led from the front, always. At the Battle of Iron Nebula, he took the Eclipse directly into the heart of the enemy formation and destroyed their command ship with a single devastating strike. At the Siege of Colony Daehan, he held the defensive line for 72 hours without sleep, without rest, until reinforcements arrived. At the assault on Krath Forward Base, he commanded the impossible boarding action that captured the enemy's central intelligence hub. The galaxy watched in awe and horror as humanity's greatest weapon lived up to his legend, the Black Phantom, the terror of galaxies. But those who served under him saw something else beneath the tactical brilliance. They saw a man fighting like he had nothing left to lose. He is getting reckless, Yuna confided to the senior officers after a particularly dangerous mission. The commander has always been aggressive, but now it is like he is trying to die. No one disagreed. They had all noticed. Do-hyun took risks that would have been unthinkable before. He volunteered for impossible missions. He was always the first into danger and the last to retreat. The crew whispered that he was running from something, chasing something, trying to outrun a ghost that only he could see. What they did not know, what no one knew, was that every night when the battles were over and the ship was quiet, Do-hyun sat alone in his quarters and listened to a recording. It was only 30 seconds long. Sujin laughing at something he had said during one of their conversations. A small sound, bright and warm, completely out of place in the cold darkness of space. He had saved it without knowing why. Now he understood. He played it every night, sometimes more than once. And each time, he felt the crack in his heart widen just a little more. He thought about her constantly. During strategy meetings, his mind would drift to the way she smiled. During battles, he would imagine what she would say about the destruction. During the rare quiet moments, he would close his eyes and remember the warmth of her hand on his face. He had faced the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy without flinching. But a woman with gentle eyes had defeated him completely. Meanwhile, 1,000 light years away, Han Sujin worked in a refugee camp on Station Mira. The survivors of the Dominion attacks poured in daily. Humans, aliens, anyone caught in the crossfire of the war. They came with burns and broken bones and trauma that would take years to heal. Sujin treated them all with the same careful attention, the same stubborn hope that had defined her entire life. She refused to watch the war broadcasts. When others gathered around screens to see the latest battle, she walked away. When the Black Phantom's name was mentioned, in fear, in admiration, in whispered legend, she busied herself with patients who needed her more than newscasts did. But she could not escape him entirely. His face was everywhere. His name was on everyone's lips. And at night, when the camp was quiet and she was alone, she would take out an old jacket, his jacket, the one he had left behind when he transferred her to the station, and hold it close. It still smelled like him. Like metal and recycled air, and something underneath that was just him. She hated that she had kept it. She hated that she still cared. But she could not bring herself to throw it away. A young nurse named Minseo found her crying one night, clutching the jacket like a lifeline. "You love him," Minseo said. It was not a question. Sujin wiped her eyes. "It does not matter." "Of course it matters. Love always matters. He is fighting a war. He does not have room for whatever this is." Sujin laughed bitterly. "I asked him who I was to him. Do you know what he said? Nothing. He said nothing. That does not mean he feels nothing. It does not mean he feels anything either." Minso sat down beside her. She was young, barely 20, but she had seen enough suffering in the refugee camp to understand some things about life. "My grandmother used to say that some men carry so much weight that they forget they are allowed to put it down. They think strength means carrying everything alone. They do not know how to share the burden, even when someone offers to help." She looked at Sujin with kind eyes. "Maybe your commander is like that. Maybe he did not know how to answer because no one ever taught him that he could." "That is a kind interpretation. It is a true one. I have seen men like him come through this camp. Warriors, survivors, people who have turned themselves into weapons because they thought it was the only way. And do you know what they all have in common?" Sujin shook her head. "They are all terrified. Not of dying. They face death every day. They are terrified of living, of hoping, of allowing themselves to want something beyond the next battle." Minseo smiled sadly. "I think your commander is very terrified indeed." That night Sujin dreamed of him. Not the Black Phantom, not the terror of Galaxies, but Do-hyun. Just Do-hyun, standing at a viewing window and watching the stars like a man who had forgotten he was allowed to rest. She woke with tears on her face and his name on her lips. In the darkness between stars, Kang Do-hyun sat in his quarters after another victory. The Dominion was retreating on all fronts. The war would be over soon. Humanity was safe, but he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pride. Just an emptiness that grew larger with each passing day. He pulled out his communicator and composed a message to Station Mira. His fingers moved slowly, unused to writing anything that was not a tactical order. "Sujin," he wrote, "I am still here. I think about you every day. I wanted you to know." He stared at the words for a long time. Then he deleted them. What right did he have to contact her? What right did he have to disrupt her life with his presence, his darkness, his endless wars? She was better off without him. She deserved someone who could give her sunshine and peace, not a man made of shadows and blood. He deleted the message and returned to his maps. Outside, the stars continued their endless watch, and two people, separated by light years in silence, thought about each other until dawn. Yuna found him the next morning, still staring at battle plans with hollow eyes. "The Dominion is requesting negotiations," she reported. "Our victory at the Krath homeworld perimeter has broken their will to fight. They want to surrender." "Then the war is almost over." "Yes, Commander, we won." Doyun nodded slowly. "Prepare the fleet to receive their diplomats. I want full security protocols." Yuna hesitated. "Sir, may I speak freely?" "When have I ever stopped you?" "When the war ends, what will you do?" Doyun was quiet for a long moment. In the silence, he could almost hear Sujin's voice asking the same question. Could almost feel her hand on his face, gentle and warm. "I do not know," he admitted. I have never had to answer that question before." "May I make a suggestion?" "You may. Go to her. Tell her what you could not say before. Give yourself a chance to find out who you might be when you are not at war." Doyun looked at his lieutenant, his friend, he realized, perhaps his only friend. "And if she does not want to see me? Then at least you will know. At least you will have tried." Yuna's voice softened. "Regret is a heavier burden than rejection, Commander. Trust me on this." She left him alone with his thoughts, and for the first time in months, Kang Do-yeon allowed himself to imagine a future that did not involve war. It was a strange feeling. It felt almost like hope. The Dominion's surrender was a trap. Do-yeon realized it too late. The peace negotiations were a distraction, a way to draw humanity's defenses away from what truly mattered. While the coalition fleet gathered at the negotiation point, the Dominion's remaining forces had been gathering in secret for one final, desperate assault. Their target was Earth, the homeworld, the cradle of humanity, the symbolic heart of everything humans had built among the stars. Do-yeon received the report just as the Dominion ambassadors revealed their true faces. Suicide bombers who destroyed the negotiation station, and 3 coalition warships in a single moment of treachery. In the chaos that followed, enemy fleets emerged from hidden positions throughout the sector, racing toward Earth with weapons charged and hatred in their hearts. "All ships!" Do-yeon's voice cut through the panic on the communications channel. "Battle formations, maximum speed to Earth. This is not a drill. This is the final battle." The journey took 16 hours. 16 hours of pushing the Eclipse's engines beyond their limits. 16 hours of watching enemy fleet movements on the tactical display, calculating that they would arrive at Earth within minutes of each other. 16 hours for Do-yeon to think about what he was racing toward, and what he had left behind. He thought about Sujin, about Station Mira, where she was probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that the galaxy was about to burn again. He thought about all the things he had never said, all the moments he had wasted. If he died today, she would never know. "Lieutenant Yuna," he called. She appeared at his side instantly. "Commander? If I do not survive this battle, I want you to deliver a message for me, to Han Sujin, at Station Mira." Yuna's face went pale. In all their years together, he had never spoken of not surviving. It was against his nature. "What message, sir?" Do-yeon was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, "Tell her she was right, about everything, and tell her I am sorry I did not have the courage to say so myself." "You could tell her yourself, Commander, after we win." "Perhaps." He looked out at the stars racing past. "But I have learned that tomorrow is not promised to anyone, and some things should not wait." They arrived at Earth to find hell. The Dominion fleet was massive, over 300 warships, plus support craft and fighter squadrons. They had already broken through the outer defensive ring and were pushing toward the inner colonies. Earth's own defense fleet was fighting bravely, but was vastly outnumbered. And beyond the battle, visible on long-range sensors, Do-yeon saw something that made his blood freeze. A Dominion strike force had broken through the main battle and was heading directly for the civilian evacuation routes. Their course would take them past one particular station, a refugee station overflowing with people who had nowhere else to go. Station Mira. Sujin. "No," he breathed. Yuna saw it too. "Commander, we cannot divert. If we leave the main battle, the defensive line will collapse. Earth itself will be at risk." She was right. Tactically, strategically, logically, she was right. One station versus an entire planet. 3,000 refugees versus 8 billion people. The math was clear, but Kang Do-hyun had never been good at math when it came to matters of the heart. "Take command of the fleet," he ordered, already moving toward the door. "Sir? You heard me. Take command. Hold the line. Win this battle. Where are you going?" He stopped at the door and looked back at her. His lieutenant, his friend, the one person who had stood by him through 17 years of war. "I'm going to do something stupid," he said. "Something that a weapon would never do." Then he was gone, running through the corridors of the Eclipse toward the fighter bay. The crew watched in shock as their commander launched alone in a single fighter craft, breaking away from the fleet and racing toward the distant station. Communications erupted with confused shouts and demands for explanation. Yuna silenced them with a single word: "Fight!" The main battle continued. The coalition forces, inspired by their commander's legend and terrified of failing him, fought with everything they had. But Do-hyun did not see it. He saw only the stars ahead, the enemy ships growing larger in his view screen, and the small dot of Station Mira in the distance. He did not know if he would make it in time. He did not know if Sujin was still there, or if she had already evacuated. He did not know anything except that he had to try. The Dominion strike force detected him coming. A single human fighter against a dozen warships. They could have ignored him. They should have ignored him. But someone recognized his flight patterns, his approach vector, the distinctive way he flew that had become legend across 12 star systems. "The Black Phantom," one of the enemy commanders reported, "alone." For a moment, the strike force hesitated. Just a moment, long enough for Do-hyun to get closer. Then they opened fire. What followed would later be called the most remarkable single-pilot engagement in human history. Do-hyun flew his fighter through a storm of weapons fire that should have vaporized him 100 times over. He dodged, he weaved, he pushed his craft beyond its design limits. Warning alarms screamed. Hull integrity dropped. But he kept flying. One by one, he destroyed the enemy fighters that tried to intercept him. One by one, he disabled the weapons systems of the warships in his path. He was one man against a fleet, and somehow, impossibly, he was winning. But it was not enough. He could not stop them all. He could not protect the station from a dozen warships alone. So he did the only thing he could do. He aimed his damaged fighter at the lead warship and accelerated. The Dominion commanders saw him coming. They saw the intent. And for the first time, they truly understood why the galaxy called humans terrifying. Any other species would retreat. Any other species would accept defeat. But this human, this single, stubborn creature, was willing to sacrifice himself just to buy a few more minutes for a station full of refugees. Do-hyun's fighter struck the warship's command deck at full speed. The explosion lit up the darkness like a small star. And in the chaos that followed, the confusion, the loss of coordination, the remaining coalition forces arrived to drive the Dominion back. Station Mira was saved, but Kang Do-hyun was gone. When the battle ended, search teams combed the wreckage. They found his fighter, scattered across several kilometers of space barely recognizable. They found pieces of his command suit. They found debris that might have been from his craft or might have been from the enemy ship, but they did not find him. 2 days later, Lieutenant Yuna, now acting commander, stood on the bridge of the Eclipse as the coalition celebrated its victory. The Dominion had surrendered for real this time, broken by the loss of their fleet. Earth was safe. Humanity had survived. But she could not bring herself to celebrate. "Ma'am," one of the officers reported, his voice strange, "we are receiving a transmission from the surface, from a medical facility in the Seoul district." Yuna turned slowly. "A transmission?" "Yes, ma'am, it is. You should see this." The main view screen flickered to life, and on it, lying in a hospital bed covered in bandages and burns, was a face that Yuna had been certain she would never see again. Kang Do-hyun opened his eyes and looked directly at the camera. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice hoarse but unmistakable, "I need to borrow a shuttle. There is someone I need to see." He was alive. The terror of galaxies, the Black Phantom, the weapon that humanity had used to terrify the stars, was alive. And he was going to Station Mira. Station Mira had never been busier. In the weeks since the war ended, refugees had flooded in from across the sector. Survivors of the Dominion attacks, displaced families seeking safety, soldiers looking for somewhere to rest their wounded souls. Han Soo-jin moved through the chaos like a woman in a dream. She treated patients. She organized supplies. She comforted children who had lost their parents and parents who had lost their children. She did everything she could to stay busy, to stay moving, to keep her mind occupied. Because when she stopped moving, she thought about him. The news had come 3 days ago. The Black Phantom was dead. He had sacrificed himself to save a refugee station, to save Station Mira, to save her. She had not cried when they told her. She had simply nodded, gone back to her patients, and continued working. The tears came later, in the quiet hours of the night, when she was alone with her grief in the old jacket she could not throw away. She had never told him. She had never said the words that had grown in her heart during those strange weeks on his ship. She had been too angry, too proud, too afraid of what it would mean to love a man made of war. Now she would never get the chance. Dr. Han, the young nurse Min Seo, appeared at her side. There is something happening at the main entrance. Everyone is gathering. I am busy. Soo-jin did not look up from her work. Dr. Han, I really think you should see this. Something in the girl's voice made Soo-jin pause. She looked up and saw tears in Min Seo's eyes, but not sad tears. Something else. Something that looked almost like joy. What is it? Min Seo just shook her head and gestured for Soo-jin to follow. The main entrance of the medical bay was crowded with people. Patients, staff, refugees. Everyone had gathered, forming a path that led from the door to the center of the room. They were all staring at something. Someone. Soo-jin pushed through the crowd, her heart starting to beat faster without understanding why. She reached the front and stopped. He was standing there. Do-hyun was standing there. He looked terrible. Bandages covered most of his visible skin. Burns marked his face and hands. He wore a simple hospital gown under a borrowed jacket, and he leaned heavily on a crutch. But he was there. He was alive. He was looking at her with those dark eyes that had once seemed so empty and now held something she could not name. The room was completely silent. Everyone knew who he was, the Black Phantom, the terror of Galaxies, the man who had saved them all. And now he stood in a refugee medical bay, clearly in pain, clearly exhausted, looking at a woman like she was the only person in the universe. You came back, Soo-jin whispered. She did not trust her voice to be louder. You asked me a question. His voice was rough, damaged by smoke and screaming engines and 3 days in a medical tank. I did not answer. I need to answer. She could not breathe, could not move, could only stand there as the man she had thought was dead took a painful step toward her. When I was 17, I decided that I would never care about anything again. Caring was weakness. Caring was how you got hurt. So I turned myself into a weapon because weapons do not feel. Weapons do not love. Weapons do not have their hearts broken when everything they love is taken from them. Another step. The crowd parted around him like water around a stone. For 17 years it worked. I was the terror of Galaxies. I was the thing that monsters feared. I was perfect and empty and alone. His voice cracked, but he kept going. And then I found you floating in the wreckage of everything you had built. And you looked at me like I was a monster. And you were right. I was. He was close now. Close enough that she could see the pain in his eyes. Not physical pain, but something deeper. Something that had been locked away for almost 2 decades and was finally breaking free. But you did not stop looking. You saw past the monster. You saw the boy who had been hiding for so long that he forgot he existed. You held my hand and told me I could be more. You believed in me when I had forgotten how to believe in anything. He stopped directly in front of her. The crutch fell from his hand, but he stayed standing through sheer will alone. You asked me who you were to me, he said, and I could not answer because I did not know. I did not know what to call this feeling. I did not know what to do with a heart that had suddenly woken up after 17 years of sleep. Do-hyun, his name came out as a sob. But I know now. He reached out and took her hand. The same scarred hand she had held on the observation deck. The same hand that had commanded fleets and destroyed armies and now trembled slightly as it touched her fingers. You are the reason I want to stop being a terror. You are the reason I want to learn how to live. You are the woman I choose. Not because the galaxy demanded it, not because it was strategic or practical or sensible, but because my heart chose you. Because when I was flying toward certain death, the only thing I could think about was that I had never told you. Tears were streaming down her face now. She did not try to stop them. You are my peace, Sujin. You are the quiet place in a universe full of war. You are the home I never thought I would have. You are everything I did not know I was missing until you called me a monster and made me want to prove you wrong. He lifted his other hand and touched her face, wiping away her tears with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that had caused so much destruction. So that is who you are to me, he said. You are the woman I love, and I am sorry it took me so long to find the courage to say it. Sujin could not speak. Words had abandoned her. So instead, she did the only thing that made sense. She kissed him. The crowd around them erupted, cheering, crying, celebrating in a way that had been impossible during the long months of war. The terror of galaxies, the Black Phantom, the weapon that had saved humanity, stood in the middle of a refugee camp and kissed a woman like she was the most precious thing in the universe. Because to him, she was. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sujin laughed through her tears. You are an idiot, she told him. You almost died. I know. You flew into a warship alone. I know. You scared me half to death. I know. He rested his forehead against hers. But I would do it again, 1,000 times, for you. She hit his chest weakly, then buried her face in his shoulder. He held her, awkwardly because of the bandages and the burns, and the fact that he had not held anyone in 17 years. But he held her, and he did not let go. 5 years later, the children of Nova Colony gathered around an old man in a garden. He did not look like a terror. He looked like a grandfather. Gray at the temples, laugh lines around his eyes, dirt under his fingernails from the plants he tended. He sat on a worn bench with a woman beside him, her hand in his, both of them watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that no war could ever touch. Tell us the story again, the children begged. Tell us about the Black Phantom. The old man smiled. The Black Phantom is just a legend, he said, a story people tell to scare each other. But they say he saved the galaxy. They say he flew alone into an enemy fleet. They say he was the most terrifying human who ever lived. Maybe, the old man agreed, but the important part of the story is not the battles he fought. The important part is what he learned. What did he learn? The old man looked at the woman beside him, his wife, his partner, his peace. She smiled at him with the same gentle eyes that had first seen past his armor all those years ago. He learned that strength is not the same as hardness. He learned that being brave enough to love is harder than being brave enough to fight. He learned that you do not become weak by caring about things. You become human. The children considered this wisdom with the seriousness that only children can manage. What happened to him, one of them asked. The Black Phantom? Where is he now? The old man laughed. It was a warm sound, full of joy that had taken 17 years to learn. He is exactly where he wants to be, he said. He is home. And in the quiet of the garden, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, Kang Do-yoon held his wife's hand and felt for the first time in his life complete. The terror of galaxies had found his peace, and she had been worth everything.